Our next guest is Brother Ray Shackleford. I think he's there and he's going to come on camera. If Reverend Odom, if you can pin him. There we go. There he is, Brother Shackleford. This is a son of Wheeler Avenue, y'all.
Offensive
Most of
lineman.
you probably know him. But Brother Ray is an activist. He works with the Houston Area Urban League and has just recently returned from DC with the National Urban League as they went before the houses there in DC and presented a national agenda at the federal level. So Brother Shackleford is going to share with us some of the priorities there. We will be working with him as well as we begin to see where again in those spaces we need to put our weight and make our voices heard. So Brother Ray, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Do you know
Great.
Ray Shackleford?
Who said that?
Ray Shackleford.
I'm assuming she's referencing my father, who's an attorney and a deacon at the church.
This is Brooke.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that Brooke? Yeah.
Yes.
He told Sister LeBeau, he said that. He goes, no, most people don't know me as Ray. They know me as Brooks.
Right. And Miss LeBeau knows me from when I was a thought, as they say. So yes, if you know me from growing up, they know me as Brooks. And yes, Ray L. Shackleford, the attorney, is my father. He is one of your deacons.
All right, Ray, go ahead and share with us what you have today.
Yes, ma'am. All right, can y'all see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So the National Urban League convenes in DC every year, typically in March and April. Obviously, COVID withstanding, and it's called the Legislative Policy Conference. This is where the National Urban League, it's more than 90 affiliates across the country, our volunteer auxiliaries, which includes the Guild and the Young Professionals, descend upon DC to meet with the administration, the different heads of state, heads of departments, and to lobby or advocate, I should say, on behalf of the communities that we serve across the community, as well as the larger national agenda. And so one of the things that I definitely want to impress from the forefront is that, you know, it's good that we meet with our members while they're in the district, but it's also very important for us to go to DC and have advocacy days as well. And President Morial, who's the National Urban League CEO, the phrase or the quote he used is, you know, sometimes your member is playing uptown and praying downtown. And essentially what he means when he says that is they're telling you one thing at home, and then when they get to DC, they're doing something completely different. Now, I will say that, you know, obviously, Sheila Jackson Lee, our Congresswoman, my Congresswoman, and Congressman Al Green, we met with both of them, and I don't think you have any concerns there. But just in general, as a measure of accountability, we should be in a practice of meeting with our members consistently, making sure that we express to them, again, not when they're just at home, but also in DC, what's important to us. And so we were able to meet with not only President Biden, but also several of the heads of departments. The Department of Commerce met with us. And one of the things that they impressed to us, they have a couple of what they call RFIs, requests for input from the community, which you can find on their website. And they're related to different programs that are being rolled out. One of them being tech hubs. So they're currently planning to put these different tech hubs in communities all over the country. And what they really wanted to make sure we understood is that this is an opportunity for us to give feedback on what we would like to see as they roll out these programs. If we have different critiques, criticisms, feedback, this is your opportunity to do that. And one of the things that we now have under the Department of Commerce for the first time in history is the Department of Minority Business Development Association. The new undersecretary for that department is Don Craven. So he actually used to be the head of the Washington Bureau for the National Urban League. He's a brother from Louisiana. He served in their legislature, and he's doing some great work leading that division. And specifically, they are tasked with supporting minority businesses, entrepreneurs, to make sure that they are growing and thriving. He made us aware that there is now $100 million in technical assistance that's available for us out there. That is definitely something that you want to connect with the local MBDA office about to make sure that you're getting access to that. So again, if you are a business owner, there's $100 million program that just rolled out for technical assistance if you're a small business owner. So you want to reach out to your local MBDA about that. We also heard from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. One of the things that they now have changed when it comes to pathway to home ownership is you are able to leverage your rental history. That's not something we've been able to do in the past. And so when you look at individuals that are coming from low to moderate incomes, if you have a positive rental history, that is something you can now use to purchase a home. For our students out there, they've historically used an average when it comes to your student debt. Now they're actually using the exact number. So it's another change that should be beneficial to most in terms of you being able to get access potentially to home ownership. They also stated, and this was alarming, but I don't think it's surprising, is that they just found out that appraisals of our homes are 20% less than our white counterparts. And this dates back to, I want to say, the 60s when the Fair Housing Act was first enacted. If you've been paying attention, there was actually a recent case where a Black family sued because they got one appraisal and they sent their white counterpart or white friend, and the appraisal was significantly higher. So they won their lawsuit because they were able to prove that. But this is something that HUD is trying to fix because Black communities have lost literally decades of generational wealth because these appraisals by lenders and lending institutions have not been accurate. They've been based on race and not the actual equity or value of these homes and properties. From an RFI perspective, one of the things that definitely applies to us here in Houston, thankfully we haven't had a major one since Hurricane Harvey. We're praying that we'll continue that streak. But in the event that we are hit with a natural disaster, the manner in which those funds are distributed is something that we need to make sure that we're monitoring and giving feedback to the federal government because there are actual very strict guidelines that the state and local government has to follow in terms of how those things are rolled out. And so if they're not following those guidelines, that may be grounds for some type of settlement, lawsuit, etc. And so just be mindful of that in the event that we have something like that. Again, we also heard from the head of the Health and Human Services Department. For them, a focus right now is mental health. And so one of the things that is very critical for our young people, they have expanded their capacity when it comes to text messages by 1,600%. Most of what we call Gen Z does not usually pick up the phone and leverage a lot of these hotlines. So for them to increase their text capacity like this is life-changing because they're able to reach these young people, potentially save lives. Throughout COVID, we've seen the suicide rates of young people, young Black people, increase significantly. So this is something that they are very intentional about solving. Recruitment in HBCUs. It's crazy that they've never done this before, but apparently now, under the Biden administration, they are recruiting at HBCUs to make sure that the individuals that work within HHS actually look like the communities that they're talking to. That's not something that can be understated. They've also extended postpartum care through Medicaid and Medicare, which is typically only 6 months to now a year. Currently, 28 states have taken advantage of this. I don't believe Texas is on that list when I last checked. And so
we are not on that list.
And so, with Rep. Reynolds, one of the things I think we have to learn to share with our peers that, aren't on this call and don't necessarily connect how and why elections matter, they have real consequences. And so when these programs are extended from the federal government, Governor Abbott, time and time again, has denied or rejected these things simply because President Biden is in a different political party, irrespective of how it impacts all Texans. Because I assure you, this is not something that is only impacting Black and brown communities. It is more significant in our communities, as we see consistently with all of these issues, but he's denying this to all Texans. Another thing that they really focused on, because after those opening plenaries, We had different sessions focused on Black women's maternal health, pathways to generational wealth, access to capital for small businesses, but also a tech justice agenda. And this is what they're saying is the new voting rights for us, because there's so much when it comes to artificial intelligence, social media, that has not been governed or legislated yet. And if we don't make sure that we're in these rooms and voicing our concerns, very much like it has happened in the past, we will be on the outside looking in. And so one of the things they said we need is a nationwide data privacy standard. That's not something that's currently in place. Pretty much every developed nation has this. And one of the reasons, at least in my opinion, that we don't have one yet is because it's not necessarily beneficial to a lot of the major social media and tech companies. So it's not something they're going to push because they want as much access as possible so that they can leverage that financially. They wanted us to know that tech jobs is much more expansive than simply just coding. You know, there are certain tech jobs you don't even need a degree to get. You can now be certified as a drone pilot. So there's programs. This is something that people should know about. And tech is not just coding or what you would think of highly technical engineering jobs. Tech companies also have to have HR departments, accounting, etc. And so I think we need to be more open-minded when it comes to those opportunities and seeking them as well. That's pretty much everything from a national perspective. I did want to, or should I just finish completely, Reverend Anderson, before I take questions? Or
Yeah, go ahead.
okay. So from a local perspective, our CEO, Judson Robinson, and the delegation from Houston, we met with a couple members of Congress. And for us, the focus, number one, was education. We don't need to belabor the point, but we've already talked about what's going on with that here in Houston, as well as from a legislative perspective in Texas and why it's so concerning. So it's definitely something that we sounded the alarm about at the federal level, seeking additional assistance there. We also talked about workforce and how Texas is attacking DEI. I had this conversation with Rep. Reynolds where, you know, they started with attacking Black history in our schools. Now it's DEI. And we believe that the next thing that they will be attacking, if it's not this session, but next session, is those MWBE programs that make sure that we have a pathway to get contracts and access to capital. So it started, you know, from an education perspective. Now they're attacking it in the workplace. The next place we feel like we'll see it is from an economic and entrepreneurial standpoint. So again, seeking assistance at the federal level there. And lastly, when it comes to voting rights, they are now trying to make illegal voting a felony. And essentially, this is where an individual potentially may have, you know, committed a crime. They have not completed their parole, probation, or supervised release. So they're what we would call still on papers. They don't know that they can't vote. So they would go to vote, and now they are charged with a additional felony, which really doesn't make sense. I mean, I teach civic engagement to our students at Yates and Worthing, and I talk to the students about this. And even at their age, they agree that the penalty should not be something like this. Now, if we find somebody obviously is intentionally trying to do something on our voting process, when they, you know, make these claims about fraud, statistically, it's not real. When you look at the cases of fraud that have happened in the state of Texas, I think it's like less than 50 out of over, I don't know, we have 30 million residents here in Texas. So it's not something that's real. And so lastly, I'll say this, at the federal level, we do not have support for a bipartisan voting rights bill. We were able to get that under the Bush administration when both the House and the Senate were led by Republicans. But currently, Senate Leader McConnell and House Leader McCarthy refused to even have the conversation. So we are continuing to push at all levels, working with our legislators here at the state, as well as the federal level. But that's pretty much the gist of what took place in DC.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That
Thank you, ma'am.
again, it's important for us to understand that we are fighting injustice on multiple fronts, and it's not just voting, but it is also holding accountable those who would then represent us in these spaces to ensure that our interest, the best interest of the community is what is being upheld, as opposed to the interest of corporations and big business and those who are doing political power grabs. We did want to go ahead and open it up for questions for Brother Ray, if anybody has any questions. Reverend Odom, I know you always have something on your mind.
Yeah, I had a follow-up, and it was interesting to me because I had some conversations with folk at the Proctor. Dr. Angela and I went to the Samuel D. Proctor Conference for Social Justice, and there was some important conversations about tech equity. And so it seems like that was a real focal point, and especially talking about how to use that resource pool of money. Was that something that surprised you, and how deep did they get into that conversation?
I'd say it was surprising from the standpoint that I didn't know that we should weigh tech rights as the new voting rights, which obviously that's a fight that we've been fighting for generations, and we're still fighting, unfortunately. I think that when you look at some of the artificial intelligence that has been rolled out, and even one thing I didn't mention is Child Privacy Act. You know, they made sure to emphasize the fact that we need to make sure we're monitoring kids, how they're interacting with social media, these different platforms, the amount of time that they have on them, because it can be significantly harmful to them. We've even seen studies on how it harms adults. So, you know, if you do have small children, I have a teenager, she just turned 13. So y'all pray for me in that respect.
It's your whole soul.
Thankfully, we've been able to keep that under wraps with baby girl, but that was probably the most surprising thing, Reverend Odom.
Yeah. Well, they're also, I mean, social media has been used to influence elections. So the social media has been used to demonize. But then, as importantly, if not more importantly, the algorithms that are being coded by people with a bias, who obviously don't have our interest in mind. And then, you know, facial technologies, it's been shown to be biased. But the biggest thing is that if we don't connect our communities to not only, you know, internet connectivity, to have access to hardware, to be able to achieve, like you were saying, to be able to be competitive, or for our children to be able to be competitive, for us to be able to have these small businesses, we need that connectivity. And so, you know, there is a pool of resources that's out there that we can access for our communities as well.
And you raised really quickly two good points. One, the programming of the artificial intelligence. So I'll give you a quick example. If you go into use a bathroom or a restroom, and you ever put your hand in front of the faucet and it wouldn't turn on, in some cases it's because how it's been programmed, and it's not intended to pick up our melanin. So that's a very simple example of something. And even when you brought up disinformation, so we know for a fact that Russians used social media to influence that election in 2016. That's been proven, where you would see these accounts that would appear as a Black person saying these inflammatory comments. And so please be mindful of how you interact on social media and fact check everything. I can't tell you how many times people send me stuff and they'll say, you know, look at this, and I have to go back and ask them, where did you get this from? So please be careful with that.
Amen. Amen.
All right. Thank you so much. I don't know if everyone realizes, but Brother Shackleford is working closely with our social justice ministry as we are preparing to advocate. He does teach a course on advocacy. Ray, when is the next group or cohort that you're going to take through your advocacy training?
So right now we're meeting every Tuesday evening from 5:30 to 6:30. Sometimes it runs to 7. Next week, we'll be talking about the budget for the state of Texas. I can share that here in the chat, but you go to the Hall website and it's real quick. You complete the registration form. And we're focused on the legislative session, obviously. So we've had Rep. Reynolds come in, we had Rep. Alma Allen come in to teach us about, what's going on from an education perspective just this week. So definitely would love to have you all.
Thank
Excellent.
you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Well, obviously, we received a lot of information. We know that we have an incredible task ahead of us, but I am still believing God for greater. We have consecrated ourselves in this time, space for to see God do the amazing. And if there was ever a time for a miracle and an intervention from the Lord, this is that time now. So not only am I going to ask you guys to participate in the advocacy, I'm going to ask you to continue to pray and ask God specifically for the things that we are needing in this country to ensure the progress of our people, and to we could even pray some of them precatory prayers that we see in Psalm, that God would knock the teeth out of those who are trying to do harm to us. So, whatever you feel like the Lord leads you to pray, but you go ahead and pray that, all right? But but I do believe that we have a God who hears our prayers and hears our cries and is concerned about the plight of those who are the least and those who are left out and
Psalm
marginalized in
35.
our communities. Yeah. So